How can we better satisfy the American news appetite? Our daily news diets are changing right before our eyes. To understand our news nutrition, let's remind ourselves where people actually go for news and knowledge in the U.S. This chart is based on a Gallup annual poll about where people go. Note where the internet falls in the mix, and note what is still number one, local TV news. Now that we understand where people are going, what are those platforms actually providing to the public news diet? Let's look at the national level first. How does news shape the way we see the world? Here is a map based on land mass. And here's how news shapes what Americans see. This map shows the number of seconds cable and network news organizations dedicated by country to international and global news in February of 2007. Many major news stories were happening around the world. There was the North Korean story, flooding in Indonesia, and the IPCC report. But here in the USA, we had our own obsession, the death of Anna Nicole Smith, which dominated much of our coverage. Quite a distorted worldview, which isn't very healthy for our democracy. This is driven by the fact that investment in international news has declined. For example, with the exception of Nairobi, New Delhi, Mumbai, and Rio, there are no network bureaus left in all of Africa, India, or South America, home to more than 2 billion people. That analysis took a geographic point of view. What about at a beat or topic level? How fortified are our news sources at a beat or topic level? My good friend Ethan Zuckerman of Global Voices has talked about the idea of a news nutritional label. We can use this notion to compare sources, like CNN and others, and can also look at the sources in aggregate to assess our news nutritional health across beats of content. Given local TV's dominance, here's the nutritional breakdown of the coverage of local news. Note again, this is the primary place where most Americans continue to understand their communities, their nation, and their world. The content beyond sports and weather, in other words, the makeup of the rest of the news, can be summed up with 3 words: crimes and accidents. So how does this compare to our national sources in broadcast? This label shows the percentage of minutes of coverage by beat dedicated by CNN and network television news. What drives the news agenda? How nourishing is this? Well, it's all politics, and if you count one-week wonders, our Super Size Me news, we are not doing well. Think political tea parties, or what is the latest on Octomom, or the latest bizarre crime case. And the internet news has issues too. Analysis of primary sources on the internet tells us much of coverage is based on the same base ingredients. Many news sources are highly AP and Reuters derivative. It is an echo chamber. However, AP's recent announcement to distribute investigative journalism from other sources is an interesting wrinkle in this equation. We also know that bloggers who can enlighten and elevate information often rely on traditional media for source material and to drive their agenda. Few actually build source material itself. Citizen journalists, too, have been successful in providing eyewitness accounts. For example, check out allvoices.com. Citizen journalists can also provide expert opinion. But in either case, they are often incapable of providing the depth and commitment required to delve into a story for sustained periods. A key impediment to maintaining the quality of American journalism's nutritional value is the overall decline in the availability of enterprise journalism in the places people go for news. Enterprise journalism is not necessarily driven by a breaking news event, but is newsworthy and is grounded in telling stories with ongoing depth and breadth by topic and often by geography too. This brand of journalism creates a base where broader understanding, conversation across points of view, and dialogue can occur. If we understand how news is historically built in a local market, we know that the local paper is a major driver of local enterprise journalism. So with the decline of local newspapers, TV and bloggers lose their natural feeder. And we are also losing an important platform for in-depth opinion, national and international news to reach people where they are consuming news. The decline in enterprise journalism is also prevalent at the national and international level. This does not promote a healthy news diet or a healthy democracy. So if we agree that information and knowledge across these areas or across the world is important, and if we agree that making the local connection is important, then we must tackle the enterprise journalism problem. What is underlying this problem? It's a growing disconnection between the channel that is reaching the public and who controls that channel, and the content creators who are now taking on the topical or geographic enterprise journalism that is required for a healthy journalism diet. This disconnection is being driven by a number of factors, many of them profit and expense-oriented. For example, last December, CNN eliminated its Science Bureau. If we believe that part of being a trusted national news source is covering science in all of its breadth and depth regularly, how can CNN have science regularly without a bureau of its own? This demonstrates the news content channel disconnection at a beat level and is significant. But there is hope. First, we know, based on Pew Research, that Americans may be interested in Octomom, but they're also hungry to understand more about the world around them. So perhaps we want our high-fat news, but we also crave something a bit more nourishing too. Here's a snapshot of interest areas from Pew from 2007, looking at 20-year trends. And in 2008, by geographic interest. We also need to remember part of the journalism story in America. Many local papers started because one family or owner decided that there was a critical service the public needed. That drive to build communities and to serve the people is still there. And with the web, you have communities that are coalescing around topics and regions who feel equally connected and aspire to provide for the common good in a sustainable way. So the question is, how can we reconnect the channels with the content being created? I will conclude by proposing a news nutritional allowance pyramid to reconnect the news creators and the channels in enterprise journalism. At its base is investment and alliances, which is about forging strategic connections and alliances between large channels and editorial specialists. Institutions reaching out to other institutions to fill this void. In other words, don't look at your editorial capacity as the beginning and the end of your editorial capacity. As Jeff Jarvis says in the web world, cover what you do best and link to the rest. That should just be the start. This can also have economic benefits and signal new financial models. For niche beat providers, their specialization can lead to revenue models through subscription or highly targeted advertising. Larger companies who are focused on scale can tap into these specialists to provide such coverage. And because the specialty provider gets access to the larger vehicle, the economic model is enhanced due to the expanded exposure. And at the same time, the larger provider can capture efficiencies by not having to invest dollar for dollar in capacity to cover these beat areas. Similarly, nonprofit journalism players can also be a rapidly growing source for enterprise journalism by connecting large providers to these content creators at a beat level. Support for nonprofit journalism organizations' endowments and capacity building to build independence will be essential to scale these efforts. The second level is market solutions for matching sources with platforms. How could we create a market with considerable scale so sources of all sizes can find and vet each other, collaborate, build cooperatives, and make the matches and reconnect? What if Google, who has revolutionized search and search advertising, took its muscle to create a marketplace whereby journalists and their product could be matched with editorial entities who seek work in topical or geographical areas? Include things like ranking and examples of best work. Build a system to help facilitate the matching process and for the public to find these connections. But what is required is a universal and open market scale to allow for cooperatives to come together amongst journalists and creators. The next level is foster more diversity of sources, where it matters, through insight technologies and interactive journalism. Leverage the power of code on the web and digital devices, these powerful and emerging algorithms, to bring a broader base of content to the fore where people go for news online. For example, if Google News or Yahoo is feeding the headlines primarily from larger sources or sources that are derivative from AP and Reuters, there remains a fiction of abundance. But there's nothing to say that more sources dedicated to topical areas that provide breadth and depth could not be added. The name brands may or may not truly be providing the in-depth coverage anymore. But how do we make room? And finally, at the top, how can we further build on citizen journalism, blogs, and the public's desire to make connections and build knowledge? Let's build user-generated connections and discovery. Could the Semantic Web be part of the answer to help people make their own connections? The Semantic Web, among other things, will help people build connections and find stories they never would have sought out, but will value. In audio, we talk about serendipity or driveway moments. How can we foster these moments and make new connections? The Semantic Web will be key. Let's aggressively move forward to leverage the power of code to help people find and be exposed to the broader perspectives. An application from Envri, which is being used by the Washington Post, although not completely semantic in nature, points to the promise of these sorts of technologies, particularly if this technology learned from user interactions to identify the strongest connections, as much as the editorial provider's selections. As you see here, this is a story about the death of the longtime president of Gabon. If you scroll down the page, you will see this, a visual representation of potentially related or interesting stories. And if you click on the president's name, more connections are revealed for you to explore further and potentially find yourself in places you never would have expected. Let's also use the Semantic Web so that we understand the underlying ingredients of these stories. In other words, the Semantic Web can also help people understand the tone, nature, and diversity of sources that the public is getting from any source or combination of sources. That is my example of the news nutritional pyramid to help reconnect content creators with platforms. However you would construct your food pyramid to increase our news nutritional daily allowance, what is clear is that the stakes are high. We are pursuing this work when all of our backyards have become the whole world. It is about local news and also national and international and global news and how we are all interconnected. It is about diverse voices, perspectives in our communities, and the new collective face of America. It is about fostering a high-functioning democracy. We can improve our news nutritional daily allowance. And can we really afford not to?